Hello, this is Faezer and this is my Ret Paladin guide for Warlords of Draenor. So, to get things started, first of all, we'll check the talents. First row, Long Arm of the Law generally is the best for most fights where the boss runs away and you want to catch up with it. Pursuit of Justice falls in some categories, but most of the time Long Arm of the Law you're going to find is the best of the three. Speed of Light, unless there's a specific fight for it, it's not very good. Second row, CC, Fist of Justice, probably the best again. AoE for Blinding Light if it's needed, but most of the time these two are irrelevant. Third row is Healing. You'll find either it's between Sacred Shield or Selfless Healer. I'd edge more on the Selfless Healer because it grants you the ability to save a raid member. If you use this on yourself, it won't heal anywhere near as much as it can heal on other people. So this is like a great tank saver if they're low, as well as using Lay on Hands as well. Don't forget about that. So generally Selfless Healer or Sacred Shield if you can find time to, because this is going to use a global cooldown as well. So if you're moving from one place, maybe like Butcher, when you get knocked back you could do a Sacred Shield. You could fit that in there, but generally Selfless Healer is better. And then for defensive cooldowns, Hand of Purity is fight dependent. Again, like Butcher, you got the bleed, that would help there. However, Unbreakable Spirit reduces the cooldown of Divine Shield, Divine Protection and Lay on Hands by 50%. It's mainly Divine Protection which is the best one, because it reduces it by 50%, which means that on a fight like Butcher, if you were going to compare it to Hand of Purity, you're going to be able to get a Divine Protection for each time you get 3 stacks, and it's going to reduce the damage if you glyph it with this one. Glyph of Divine Protection reduces it gives you 20% physical damage reduction, but takes 20% magical away. That is a good one. Clemency helps with raid, mainly for the 2 Hand of Protections. You can put those on raid members, for example Tectus. You can protect them when it's the Tectonic Upheaval. Cast it on 2 mage DPS, they're going to free cast. It's not going to affect their DPS and they'll take no damage. So it's mainly depending on fight if you want to go Hand of Purity, but you can always guarantee Unbreakable Spirit helps out quite a lot. And Clemency again, fight dependent. Now for DPS cooldowns, Holy Avenger is more a burst AoE talent. So again, Tectus, good example. When the ads split up, mainly I'd probably say for Mythic, when you get all of the small ads out and you just AoE like crazy, Holy Avenger probably will be better in that situation. Sanctified Wrath, the more single target DPS, but generally the best one as well. You're going to use this one for most single target fights. And Divine Purpose is probably the more cleave. It's like a worse version of Sanctified Wrath, but it does work well with Final Verdict if it procs at the right times, which gives it a bit of an RNG basis. Unfortunately, so you can't always rely on this one. You could get loads of procs at once and then you could get none. So more about cleave for that one, but I'd still like to say Sanctified Wrath would pull out better and more consistent as well. Then for another DPS cooldown tree, we have Execution Sentence for a single target and Light's Hammer for AoE. Holy Prism, not really. So Light's Hammer best for AoE, Execution Sentence, single target. And the last tree, we have Final Verdict mainly is the one to go for at the moment. Maybe in next patch when Blackrock Foundry comes out, we might see some better usage of Empowered Seals or Seraphim, but really it's just Final Verdict is the best, where every time you use this you want to interweave Divine Storm into, so you'll go Final Verdict then Divine Storm, Final Verdict, Divine Storm, and it just gives Divine Storm a massive AoE, and it will make it so that it's part of the single target rotation. So when it comes to AoE, Divine Storm is going to hit like a truck. Seraphim is the burst for 15 seconds up, 15 seconds down. You always want to make sure if you do use this that when it's off cooldown you're going to be instantly using it again most of the time. The only fight I'd say at the moment I'd seen Seraphim better would be Korag, when if you're struggling based on your magic or your physical DPS, because Templar's Verdict instead of Final Verdict would be some physical DPS, so that could help. But Seraphim would allow you, when he goes to sit down, do massive damage. Still, most of the time Final Verdict is going to pull better, and Empowered Seals, it's not really, it's probably the worst of the three, especially at the moment. So you're going to find either one of these. More generally, Final Verdict will be the better one. Let's move on to glyphs. The only mandatory one is going to be Glyph of Templar's Verdict. Reduce damage taken by 10% for 6 seconds. That's going to be the optimal one that you're going to always want to have. Glyph of Hand of Sacrifice, I like this one, especially because I like to use Hand of Sacrifice a lot, which you should always be. And it's going to make you take no damage, so you can give this a tank and you're not going to have to worry about taking extra damage. For the third slot, Mass Exorcism, say like Imperator, Margok, Last Phase, all those ads are trickling out of those aberrations. That's going to help out on DPS. If there's not really AoE, like, well, what fight? So we say like Bracken Spore, it's not really AoE, it's maybe just 2 targets. You look at Double Jeopardy, increases the damage taken of Judgment by 20% on the second target, so it won't be for single target, it's not going to do anything. If you're not going to use either of these two, then probably Divine Storm, heal you for 4%, or Divine Protection. I'd switch Divine Protection out for the damage bonus, because it's not a massive damage bonus, but I'd rather use Divine Protection for 20% physical damage if it's required, where there's no magic damage taken, such as Butcher, where it's just physical damage. So Divine Protection, if you use that and it's 40% magic damage, it's going to do nothing, so that's quite bad. The rest aren't really anything viable. Avenging Wrath, heal 1% for every 4 seconds, it's pretty useless. Divine Storm for a bit of a heal is better in that situation if you're going for heals. But that's the talents and the glyphs, so let's move more onto rotation. So for the rotation, you're going to be bursting at the start, so you want to make sure you use a pot and Avenging Wrath, and straight away go in and throw a Hammer of Wrath. After that, Execution Sentence. If it's AoE and you're going to be using Light's Hammer, it's probably better to not use it, obviously if it's just a single target, and save it for when there's AoE to be going on. But during burst, since I'm using Sanctified Wrath, it reduces the cooldown of Hammer of Wrath by 50%. That means that you're going to weave between Hammer of Wrath and one other spell. Usually it's going to be Crusader Strike or Final Verdict. And you always want to make sure that Hammer of Wrath is always going on cooldown, so you want to keep using that whenever you can. And make sure that you do not go over 5 Holy Power though. So you want to make sure that, because during burst you're not going to run out of Holy Power. I see it's practically impossible. And you're going to make sure that you keep weaving in Final Verdict and Divine Storm. So I like to, probably not a good idea, but I'll just show you in a sec. I like to track Final Verdict and the Divine Storm procs, because when Divine Storm procs it's going to do a lot more damage, but you don't want to use that without a Final Verdict proc, because it's not going to do anywhere near as much damage as it would do if you just save it for a little bit. So I'll just try and show burst. So I'm going to use pot, wings, hammer, executing sentence, and just keep switching between Hammer of Wrath, so Final Verdict, Hammer of Wrath, Crusader Strike, Hammer of Wrath, Divine Storm, Hammer of Wrath, Crusader Strike, Hammer of Wrath, Final Verdict, and we've got the proc. So now proc, and just keep weaving Hammer of Wrath between another one. Alright, now burst is gone, so now we can use Judgment and Exorcism. And you just want to keep this up. Always use Crusader Strike over the priority from Judgment, and Exorcism's the last one, because Exorcism doesn't hit that hard. So it's like the last resort really. But that's pretty much burst, and it just carries on like that, single target, where you just keep using your holy powers, Crusader Strike, Judgment, and then Exorcism. Never go over 5 holy power because it's just wasted DPS. You always want to try and build up to 5 holy power and then have Final Verdict. If you've got a Divine Storm proc as well, bear that in mind because you're not going to use up your holy power, and it's best to use the Divine Storm proc when you're about 3 or 4 holy power, so that then you can get Crusader Strike back on cooldown. For AoE though, AoE is a little bit different. If there's constant 2 targets or more, you're going to want to use Seal of the Righteousness for 2 targets. If it's 2 targets like for a few seconds, about 10 seconds, it's not worth it, and it's just stay in Seal of Truth. But on a fight where, say, like Twin Ogrons, the bosses are together all the time, it's really good to make sure that you are in Seal of the Righteousness and getting that cleave damage. So, for example here, you just situate yourself, make sure that you're in between them, and do the clear. I'm not going to go near that tank one because that's going to hurt me. Oh god, it's going to kill me. But as you can see, the damage is going on that as well. If there is 5 targets or more, you're then going to use Hammer of the Righteousness. Just get away from this dummy, it's a pain in the ass. Right, so you're going to use Hammer of the Righteous. This is for 5 or more targets. Do not use that if there's 3 targets or 2 targets. It's just stick with Crusader Strike. And it's just follow the same rotation as single target. So we'll go in, Hammer of the Righteous, Divine Storm, and you're going to get that cleave, and it's the Divine Storm proc which is going to do most of the cleave damage. You'll find that Divine Storm will be the top damage ability, but when there is lots of targets, Divine Storm is just going to hit so much, it'll be your most damaged ability, apart from Hand of Light. Hand of Light's the mastery. So yeah, so just follow the same single target rotation, except Hammer of the Righteous instead of Crusader Strike, and just carry on with the Final Verdict. If you're using Seraphim, obviously you don't use Templar's Verdict, you'll use Divine Storm if there is more than 2 targets. Otherwise, again, it's just better just to stick with Templar's Verdict in most situations. But that's the rotation. So for stats, you want to make sure that you try and get the 9% haste if you can. At the moment it's a bit tough, but you want to try and get that because that's the breakpoint practically, and then you'll go Mastery, Multi-Strike, Crit, Versatility, and then Haste again. But Mastery is the main stat, but you want to get that 9% haste. So that's pretty much the guide to Ret. Just make sure that you always try and get your holy power generators on cooldown. Never try to be doing where you'd be doing nothing if you were using Judgment before Crusader Strike, because that screws over the rotation. And yeah, make sure that you do the Ret Paladins proud. So this was Faezer's Ret Guide, and I hope that it helped. So good luck in Highmaul and for the future of Worlds of Draenor. Thank you all.